They starved it. They pretended it was not there. And the narcissist, of course, encouraged this with everything they had. Because a fed shadow inside an empath is the single greatest threat to a narcissist's existence. The shadow is the part of the empath that sees through the act, that catalogues every contradiction, that names what is happening as it is happening, that refuses to soften the edges of someone else's behavior in order to make them more bearable. A shadow that, powerful, awakened and fed, would have walked out of the relationship in the first month. So the narcissist worked, often with extraordinary subtlety, to keep that shadow underfed and ashamed. They mocked the empath's intuition. They reframed the empath's directness as cruelty. They called the empath's no a lack of love. They told the empath, in 1,000 small ways, that the shadow was the problem, the shadow was unspiritual, the shadow was unloving, the shadow was the proof that the empath was not actually a good person and had no right to walk away. But shadows do not die from being ignored. They wait, they strengthen, they watch, and they remember. By the time the empath finally stops bleeding, the shadow has been watching for years, maybe decades. It knows exactly who hurt them, when, and how many times. It knows every lie that was told. It knows every promise that was broken. It knows every moment the empath silenced themselves to protect the comfort of the person who was actively destroying them, and it has been waiting, patiently, for permission to rise. When that permission finally comes, when the empath turns inward at last and says to that shadow, "You can stay. You are part of me. I am no longer ashamed of you." What is born is something neither the empath nor the narcissist has ever encountered before. It is not a colder version of the empath. It is the integrated empath. Compassion fused with clarity. Tenderness fused with discernment. Love fused with the absolute, unshakable willingness to walk away from anyone who refuses to honor it. Jung described the result of integration as a kind of inner alchemy. Lead becomes gold not by being purified into something gentler, but by being unified with what was previously denied. The empath is not nicer after integration. The empath is whole. And wholeness is what the narcissist has always feared most, because wholeness cannot be split, manipulated, or weaponized against itself. It does not retaliate. It does not punish. It does not seek revenge. It does something far more devastating. It simply stops reacting. You have to understand what this looks like from the narcissist's side, because most empaths underestimate what they have just done. For years, the narcissist has operated a finely tuned system. Trigger A produces reaction B. Withdraw affection on Tuesday, get over effort on Wednesday. Pick a subtle fight on Sunday, get an apology by Monday. Forget the birthday, get the patient explanation. Bring up the old wound, get the tearful reassurance. The empath is, in the narcissist's internal world, a predictable instrument, a machine that responds in known ways to known inputs, and then one day the instrument no longer plays. The narcissist tells the lie, and there is no flicker of confusion in the empath's face. The narcissist starts the silent treatment, and the empath does not chase. The narcissist manufactures a crisis, and the empath simply watches it unfold the way a person watches weather they are not standing in. The narcissist accuses, blames, reframes, accuses again, sharpens the words, raises the volume, and the empath says nothing. Not because they are afraid, not because they are stunned, because they are no longer present in the system at all. This is the moment the narcissist's body knows before their mind does. Something is wrong, something is missing, something has been removed, and what has been removed is the one thing they were never able to generate on their own. The empath's energy, the empath's belief, the empath's investment. Without those three, the narcissist is exactly what they have always actually been, just not in front of an audience that mattered. Empty. Here is what Jung understood about this moment, and what almost no one else has ever named with the necessary precision. There is no rage on earth like the rage of a narcissist who senses their supply collapsing. They will escalate in ways the empath did not believe were possible. They will cry, they will threaten, they will weaponize children, friends, finances, history, religion, anything within reach. They will perform redemption with breathtaking sincerity. They will perform devastation with surgical timing. They will accuse the empath of cruelty for the same emotional unavailability they themselves practiced for years. Think about how many times you have lain awake at 3 in the morning rehearsing the sentence you wanted to say, but knew you would never be allowed to say without consequence. The narcissist in your life, the one or the many, knew. Not consciously, perhaps. But on some primal level, they knew the system was working. They could push and you would absorb. They could withdraw and you would chase. They could rewrite the past in front of you and you would doubt your own memory before you would dare doubt theirs. So they kept doing it. For years, they kept doing it. They built their entire self-image on top of a foundation that was actually you. Your willingness, your softness, your refusal to make them face themselves. And the part of you that watched all of this happening, the part Jung named the inner witness, never closed its eyes. Not once. It was not asleep. It was not numb. It was simply waiting, gathering, recording, and learning, with a patience the narcissist would not have understood even if you had described it to them directly. The witness was building a case so complete, so unanswerable, that the day it finally rose to speak, there would be nothing left to argue with. Now here is what Jung understood that almost no one is willing to say out loud, even today. The empath was never the weak one in this dynamic. The empath was the one with the larger psychic field. Read that again, slowly. The empath was the one with the larger psychic field. The narcissist appears powerful only because they perform power loudly, while feeling almost nothing internally. They have to perform it. They have no choice. The hollowness inside the narcissist's psyche is so vast, so unbearable, that without constant external reflection, without a steady supply of emotional response from someone whose interior is real, they would not be able to hold themselves together for a single afternoon. They need the empath. They do not love the empath. They need them. The way a parasite needs a host, the way a candle needs oxygen, and they panic in the precise way a candle panics when the air is taken away. The empath, by contrast, contains entire universes. Pain, beauty, perception, intuition, grief, tenderness, fury, devotion, all held simultaneously, often without rest, often without acknowledgement, often without a single human being in their life ever asking how it feels to carry that much without setting it down. This is why empaths are exhausted. Not because they are weak, but because they are carrying everyone, including the one person who should never have been allowed inside the gates. Jung called this the asymmetry of the relationship. The narcissist is small but loud. The empath is vast but quiet. As long as the empath stays inside the role assigned to them, absorbing, forgiving, explaining, soothing, smoothing, the asymmetry holds. The narcissist gets to play emperor of an empire that exists entirely inside someone else's nervous system. They believe the empire is theirs. They believe the throne is real. They have never understood that the throne is made of one thing only, the continued, voluntary, unconscious compliance of the one person they spent years convincing was beneath them. But what Jung saw, and what made him rethink everything he believed about psychological power, was this. The empath is sovereign. They have simply not realized it yet, and the day they realize it, the empire collapses in seconds. Because the empire was never made of the narcissist's power. It was made of the empath's compliance. Withdraw the compliance and there is nothing left. No charisma, no strategy, no mask, just a small, frightened, hollow person who can no longer feed. The shock of it cannot be overstated. The narcissist has spent years believing they were the source of the relationship. They are not the source. They are the symptom. The source was always the empath, and the moment the source seals itself, the symptom withers. This is the secret Jung circled for decades. The narcissist does not victimize the empath because the empath is small. The narcissist victimizes the empath because the empath is vast, and vastness, when it is unconscious of itself, is the easiest thing in the world to plunder. Wake the vastness up. Make it conscious of itself. Let it remember its own size, and the plundering ends in a single instant, forever. This is the moment Jung called the mobilization of the shadow. Up until now, the empath has been split. The conscious self is kind, generous, forgiving, eternally available. The shadow self, the part the empath has been taught to hate, is sharp, perceptive, unforgiving, surgically clear about who is allowed near them and who is not. For years, the empath has kept the shadow chained in the basement of their psyche, because they were taught that this part of them was bad, selfish, cold, unspiritual, not how a good person behaves. So they fed the shadow nothing. There is a moment in every empath's life that the narcissist never sees coming. Not the moment they cry, not the moment they leave, not the moment they finally raise their voice. Something quieter, something colder, something that arrives one ordinary afternoon. In the middle of a sentence, the narcissist is still speaking and changes the temperature of the entire room without a single word being said. Carl Jung spent his life mapping the deepest architecture of the human mind, and what he came to understand about this exact moment troubled him more than almost anything else he wrote about. He hinted at it in fragments. He referenced it indirectly in case studies. He rarely spoke of it out loud because what he saw threatened the entire architecture of how we understand power, abuse, and the so-called weakness of sensitive people. The most dangerous person in any room, Jung came to recognize, is not the predator at the top of the social hierarchy. It is not the narcissist with the polished smile, the strategic charm, the rehearsed apology. The most dangerous person in any room is the empath who has finally stopped bleeding. Most people will refuse to believe this. They have been taught, conditioned, trained from childhood that the empath is the soft one, the fragile one, the one who gets used and discarded. But Jung saw something deeper. He saw that the empath was never weak. The empath was restrained. And the moment that restraint finally lifts, the moment the bleeding stops and the watching begins, something is born inside that person that no narcissist on earth is equipped to handle. You're about to learn why. You're about to learn what changes inside an empath when they finally cross the threshold the narcissist always assumed they would never reach. And you're about to recognize, perhaps for the first time in your life, that what you have been calling brokenness in yourself was actually the slow construction of something the people who hurt you would never be able to control. The fed-up empath is not the wounded animal the narcissist believes they have created. The fed-up empath is what the narcissist has been instinctively, secretly terrified of from the very beginning. If something in those words just made the back of your neck go cold, hit subscribe right now and leave a single comment that says, "I see it." That is all. No story. No explanation. Just those 3 words. Because what you are about to hear was not written for everyone. You know exactly when the bleeding started. You may not remember the date. You may not remember the first incident with any clarity, but somewhere inside you, your body remembers. It remembers the first time you swallowed a feeling because expressing it felt unsafe. It remembers the first time you apologized for being upset by something that should never have happened to you in the first place. It remembers the first time you watched yourself from across the room, performing calm, performing forgiveness, performing the version of yourself that would not provoke another rage, another silent treatment, another long, cold week of being punished for the crime of being honest. And from that moment onward, you began the slow, disappearing act that has now defined entire chapters of your life. You learned to read the air before you entered a room. You learned to track moods like a meteorologist, track storms. You learned which words triggered which reactions, and you adjusted your sentences in your head before they ever left your mouth. You learned to apologize for things you did not do. You learned to thank people for the bare minimum of decency. You learned to feel grateful for the absence of cruelty and to mistake that gratitude for love. The most exhausting part of all of it, the part almost no one ever talks about, is that none of this looked like abuse from the outside. It looked like maturity. It looked like patience. It looked like grace. People praised you for it. Family members called you the strong one, the wise one, the peacekeeper, the rock. Friends came to you for advice because you always seemed to understand, always seemed to forgive, always seemed to find the good in difficult people. What none of them realized, what perhaps you yourself did not realize, is that every act of so-called wisdom was costing you something irreplaceable. A piece of your spontaneity, a piece of your hunger, a piece of the part of you that knew, instinctively, what you wanted before you were trained to override the knowing. Think about how many times you have walked into a family gathering and known, within the first 30 seconds, exactly which storms were brewing under the surface of which conversations. Think about how many times you have answered a phone call and heard the small inflection in someone's voice that told you they were about to ask for something they should have handled themselves. They will call old friends, family members, acquaintances, telling a story so well edited that even people who have known the empath for decades will momentarily wonder. They will dig through the past for any moment of imperfection and weaponize it as proof, and in their most desperate hour, they will love bomb. Suddenly the patient partner, suddenly the apologetic parent, suddenly the reformed friend. They will reach for the version of the empath that used to live for these performances, and they will be confused, almost wounded, when nothing reaches them. Because the integrated empath is no longer playing. They are not even watching the game. They have walked off the field, and the field, the narcissist suddenly realizes, was never theirs to begin with. The grass, the borders, the rules, all of it was the empath's contribution. Removed from the empath, the field disappears, and the narcissist is standing alone in an open space that is not even a stadium anymore, performing for an audience that has stood up and quietly gone home. This is why the fed-up empath is more dangerous than the narcissist will ever be. Read this carefully, because most people get it wrong. The empath is not dangerous because they have become like the narcissist. The empath is dangerous because they have become entirely unlike them and unlike anyone the narcissist has ever known how to control. The narcissist is dangerous in predictable ways. They wound through manipulation, contempt, devaluation, and discard. Every move in their playbook depends on someone else caring enough to react. Every weapon in their arsenal requires the target to still be reaching for the relationship in some form. The fed-up empath, by contrast, is not running a playbook at all. They have walked outside of strategy entirely. They are not trying to win. They are not trying to expose. They are not trying to get the last word, the moral high ground, or the satisfying closing scene. They have something far more terrifying than any of those things. They have already left internally, and they are simply waiting for circumstances to align with what has already happened inside them. The narcissist senses this and panics, because none of their tools work on someone who is not asking for anything. You cannot manipulate someone who does not need your approval. You cannot gaslight someone who has stopped consulting your version of reality. You cannot devalue someone who has already stopped seeking your valuation. You cannot discard someone who left the room 6 months ago in their own mind. Every tactic the narcissist has ever relied on requires the empath to still be reaching, still hoping, still translating the cruelty into something more bearable. And the fed-up empath is not reaching. They are sitting still, fully visible, completely unavailable. The longer they sit there, the more the narcissist's facade begins to crack in front of everyone, because the empath is no longer the only one watching now. Other people are starting to see. The friends who were charmed, the family members who took sides, the colleagues who heard one version of every story. They begin to notice that the empath, the supposedly difficult one, the supposedly hysterical one, the one the narcissist warned them about for years, is in fact the calmest, clearest, most grounded person in the room. And the narcissist, the supposedly stable and reasonable one, is the one quietly unraveling in the corner. The reputation the narcissist spent years building begins to dissolve, not because the empath is attacking it, but because the empath has stopped propping it up. This is the part Jung found almost holy. The empath does not have to expose anyone. They simply stop concealing. They simply stop explaining. They simply stop carrying. In the narcissist, who has been standing on top of all that invisible labor for years, suddenly has nothing under their feet. There is no audience left to perform for. There is no smaller person standing nearby to make them look tall. There is only the truth, finally unobstructed, and the truth was never on the narcissist's side. Now you must be prepared, because the road from bleeding empath to integrated empath is not gentle. The narcissist will not go quietly. They will sense the shift before you have even finished arriving at it, and they will deploy every weapon they have. They will love-bomb you back to the version of yourself you were before you started waking up. They will threaten to harm themselves, to leave, to destroy something you love, to take something you cannot bear to lose. They will recruit other people into the campaign, family members, mutual friends, sometimes even your own children, used as messengers without ever being told what they are carrying. There will be days you wonder if you are being too cold, days you doubt your own clarity, days you remember a version of them that was tender and miss it so badly you almost reach back across the space you have built. This is the moment Jung warned about most carefully, because in this moment, the old conditioning will rise up like a tide and try to drown the new self before it has fully formed. The voice that says, "But maybe I am the problem." The voice that says, "But I should be more compassionate." The voice that says, "But what about everything we built?" That voice is not your soul speaking. That voice is the trauma response that kept you alive inside the dynamic, and it does not yet know that the dynamic is over. You do not have to argue with it. You do not have to fight it. You only have to recognize it for what it is. An old survival program running in a body that no longer needs it. Let it run. Do not feed it. And on the other side of it, you will find something the bleeding version of you never believed was possible. Stillness. Real, deep, structural stillness. Not the brittle stillness of suppression. The settled stillness of a person who has finally stopped abandoning themselves. You will sleep differently. You will breathe differently. You will hear your own thoughts without static for what may be the first time in your adult life. This is what the world has always misunderstood about the integrated empath. People will call you cruel. People will call you cold. People will say you have changed, and they will say it like an accusation. Let them. They are describing the absence of the version of you that used to set themselves on fire to keep them warm. Of course they miss her. Of course they miss him. That version of you was useful in ways that did not require the rest of the world to grow, but you are not here to be useful in that way anymore. You are here to be whole. And wholeness, in a world that has been feeding on your fragmentation, is the most subversive thing you can become. This is not cruelty. This is clarity. This is not coldness. This is correctness. This is not abandonment of others. This is the long overdue ending of the abandonment of yourself. Jung wrote that the most dangerous person in any room is the one who has finally come home to themselves, because they cannot be moved by the strategies that move everyone else. They cannot be flattered into compliance. They cannot be guilted into self-betrayal. They cannot be frightened into silence. They have already passed through the worst version of themselves losing themselves, and they are not going back. The narcissist senses this immediately, and so does every other person who has ever benefited quietly from your unconsciousness. They will scatter. Some will plead. Some will rage. A few, the rare ones, will rise to meet you, and those are the relationships that survive into your next life. The rest were never relationships. They were arrangements. And arrangements end the moment one party stops paying. So if you are listening to this and you can feel something inside you nodding slowly, like an ancient part of you waking up after a long sleep, do not be afraid of it. That is not the part of you that is broken. That is the part of you that is finally arriving. The part the narcissist always feared was in there. The part Jung said was the true reason they chose you in the first place. They did not choose you because you were weak. They chose you because somewhere inside you was a power so vast that, if it ever fully woke up, it would walk straight out of their world without looking back. That moment is here. It has, in fact, already begun. And no one in your life, including you, will be able to stop what comes next. If something in this video found you at exactly the right time, subscribe to keep walking this path with me, and share this with the one person you know who is right at the edge of their own awakening. They will know who they are when they hear it. They will recognize the moment the same way you just did.